So I want you to picture this. It's Los Angeles, early 1940s.
Right, peak Hollywood golden age.
Exactly. And we are in the grand ballroom of this just like sprawling Hollywood mansion.
The kind you only see in movies.
Right. And the air is just thick with expensive cigar smoke and heavy perfume. There's this driving rhythm of a live jazz band tucked away in the corner.
Sounds incredibly glamorous.
Oh, totally. Camera bulbs are popping, with that blinding magnesium flash. And downstairs, amidst all this noise and opulence, every single eye in the room is locked onto one person.
She's the center of gravity.
She really is.
Yeah.
And the studios, utilizing the formidable weight of their marketing machine, have explicitly sold her to the globe with this single, unshakable caption.
Right.
They called her the most beautiful woman in the world.
And, that caption, it was really a directive. It told the public, the press, her peers, exactly how they were supposed to consume her. You look at her, you admire the symmetry of her face, you photograph her. And that is the absolute boundary of your interaction with her.
It's like a fence.
Exactly. You don't ask what she's thinking because the studio has already decided that her thoughts are totally irrelevant to her value.
Right. Everyone in that ballroom is just consuming her image. And this is where it gets interesting. I want to physically guide you, the listener, away from that jazz band.
Okay, where are you going?
We are going to slip out of the ballroom, walk up this grand sweeping staircase, and head down a quiet, dimly lit hallway to a room at the very back of the house.
Far away from the flashbulbs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No magazine photographer ever captured this room.
Yeah.
None of the gossip columnists downstairs even know it exists. So we open this heavy wooden door, and inside, it's just completely silent.
A total contrast to downstairs.
Yeah. And in the middle of the room, there is a large, sturdy drafting table. Scattered all across it are graphite pencils, precise calipers, specialized hand tools, and the disassembled metallic guts of this complex mechanism. And pinned to the board are the worked-out mathematical beginnings of an idea designed to keep a military torpedo's radio signal from being jammed by enemy forces.
Which is a massive deal in the 1940s.
Huge. It's a piece of anti-jamming technology that the United States Navy desperately needs at this exact moment in the war. And the hook for our deep dive today is the woman holding court downstairs and the woman who will sit at this drafting table later tonight in the quiet engineering military communications.
They're the same person.
They are the exact same person.
I mean, it just introduces the central tragedy of her life so brilliantly. Here is a human being who is looked at by literally millions of people, but truly seen by absolutely no one.
Right. So today our deep dive is focused on Hedy Lamarr. And our mission for this journey is to rescue her from two very distinct but equally suffocating cages.
And we're pulling from an incredible stack of sources today to do this. We aren't just looking at, standard Hollywood biographies or studio press releases.
Yeah, we really dug in.
Yeah, the source material is what makes this so fascinating. We're synthesizing original U.S. Patent Office records, files from the Smithsonian, in-depth analyses from patent historians, and deep biographical records.
It's a lot of ground to cover.
It is. We're trying to bridge this massive gap between the, superficial history of cinema and the highly rigorous, deeply pragmatic history of military engineering.
And through those sources, we are going to dismantle those two cages. The first cage is that old Hollywood caption we just mentioned, right? Reducing her to just a beautiful face.
Right.
But the second cage is much newer. It's the viral internet caption that has recently crowned her the mother of Wi-Fi.
Which, both of those narratives are forms of historical myth-making.
How so?
Well, we tend to think that when modern history tries to correct a past wrong, it does so with perfect accuracy, like we finally got it right.
Yeah, we like to pat ourselves on the back.
Exactly. But with Lamarr, we see that historical myth-making often fails the very people it tries to elevate. We end up just trading one flattened, two-dimensional caricature for a different two-dimensional caricature.
Because it's easier to digest.
Right. Mostly because the new one makes us feel better about how progressive we are today.
Wow. Okay, so we need to understand how a person gets trapped in these captions in the first place. And to do that, we have to travel pretty far away from Hollywood.
Yeah, we have to go to Vienna.
Vienna, 1914.
Yeah.
Because she wasn't born Hedy Lamarr, was she?
No, she was born Hedwig Eva Maria Kiesler. And the environment of her birth is just critical to understanding her mind.
Set the scene for us. What is Vienna like in 1914?
Vienna in 1914 is, it's the cultural and intellectual beating heart of Europe. She is born into a highly prosperous upper-class Jewish family. Her father, Emil Kiesler, was a very successful bank director.
Okay, so a lot of privilege.
Immense privilege, but it's also an environment that prized deep intellectual engagement.
Right, it's a society where grand architecture, deep philosophical debates, cutting-edge science, that's all just part of the daily atmosphere.
Exactly. And within that very specific atmosphere, young Hedwig receives private tutoring. But her father, in particular, nurtures something really unique in her.
What was it?
Well, she doesn't just display a quick wit. She has this profound, innate, mechanical curiosity. She constantly wants to know how the world functions underneath its surface.
She wants to take things apart.
Literally. Her father, Emil, would take her on these long walks through Vienna. And instead of just, admiring the scenery or the trees, he would break down the inner workings of the streetcars they saw.
Oh, that's so cool.
Or he'd explain the complex mechanics of a printing press to her. He actively cultivated her engineering mind from a very young age.
But alongside that mechanical aptitude, she clearly had a performative streak, right? I mean, she gets into acting very young, eventually studying at Max Reinhardt's renowned theater school in Berlin.
She did, yeah.
And that collision, her acting and her really striking appearance, it leads to a moment that completely derails the trajectory of her life.
It really does.
In 1932, when she's just 18 years old, she stars in a Czech film called Ecstasy. And the global reaction is just explosive.
To call it a scandal almost understates it. In the context of 1930s cinema, Ecstasy broke massive, deeply entrenched taboos.
What exactly happens in the movie?
Well, the film featured a brief scene of her swimming nude and another scene which was arguably more controversial that simulated intense romantic passion, focusing very tightly on her facial expressions.
Which today, in our current media landscape, might seem incredibly tame, almost artistic.
Totally tame today. But in 1932, it was a cultural earthquake.
I read the film was outright banned in the United States and Germany. And I believe the Pope even publicly condemned it.
He did. The actual Pope condemned it. It became an international sensation overnight, and it permanently fused her identity to a very specific, provocative, physical notoriety.
I want to look at the psychology of this moment because it feels like a major turning point.
It absolutely is.
If you are an 18-year-old girl with a curious, highly capable mechanical mind, and suddenly the entire globe unilaterally decides that your only valuable contribution to society is your naked body on a screen.
Yeah.
How does it not permanently lock you into a defensive posture? Like, was the extreme Hollywood glamour she adopted later in life actually a learned defense mechanism? A shield against the trauma of the ecstasy scandal?
The scandal was a harsh, unforgiving education in the currency of the world she was navigating.
A harsh education. I like that phrasing.
It taught her definitively that society intended to consume her body and her face, entirely ignoring her intellect. When the world tells you so aggressively what your singular value is, you adapt.
You play the game.
You build a wall out of the very thing they're staring at. She learned to wield her appearance as a tool, and perhaps as armor, because it was the only leverage the world allowed her to have.
And that notoriety, that specific kind of fame, leads directly into a very dark chapter for her. Her marriage to Friedrich Fritz Mandl in 1933.
Yes, Fritz Mandl.
Mandl is one of the wealthiest men in Austria. He's a munitions manufacturer, and he is doing massive business with fascist governments, including Mussolini.
Mandl is the architect of her first true gilded cage.
He sounds awful.
He was intensely possessive and fiercely controlling. The irony is that he married her partly because of her fame, but then he spent an absolute fortune trying to buy up and physically destroy every existing print of ecstasy.
Because he couldn't stomach the idea of other men looking at his wife.
Exactly. He forbade her from acting. He isolated her. She went from being a promising young actress to a highly guarded, incredibly valuable object of art in his collection.
He would bring her to these lavish, opulent dinner parties at his castle.
Right.
She is seated at the table with international arms dealers, military generals, and fascist politicians. And the expectation is that she just sits there, looks breathtakingly beautiful, and remains entirely silent.
That was the expectation. But this is where the narrative of Hedy Lamarr gets incredibly fascinating.
Okay.
Mandl and his associates treated her like a decorative centerpiece. They assumed she was this vapid, beautiful girl who couldn't possibly grasp the complexities of their adult, masculine conversations.
But they were deeply mistaken.
Completely. She was doing what she had done since she was a little girl, walking with her father. She was analyzing.
Okay, I have to push back here.
Sure.
Because I read the sources, and it sounds almost too perfectly cinematic.
Yeah.
I have a hard time buying that a 1930s actress, just by sitting quietly at a few dinner parties, could magically absorb enough actionable, highly technical engineering data to eventually design a military torpedo system.
Right.
Isn't that playing into the very myth-making we're supposed to be busting? Like, how does she actually learn this stuff?
That is a completely fair challenge. It does sound like a movie script, but we have to remember two things.
Okay, what are they?
First, she already possessed a highly developed foundational understanding of mechanics from her upbringing. She wasn't starting from zero. She had the vocabulary of engineering.
From the streetcars and the printing presses.
Exactly. And second, these weren't casual dinner parties. Mandel's company was at the absolute cutting edge of European munitions. At these tables, they were engaging in deep, prolonged, highly technical arguments about the future of warfare.
So what exactly are they arguing about while she's quietly eating her soup?
They were discussing the sheer technical difficulty of modern naval warfare, specifically torpedoes.
Great.
A torpedo in the 1930s is an incredibly expensive, highly complex weapon, and its biggest flaw is accuracy. They discuss wire-guided systems, which are literally attached to a spool of wire, but those are cumbersome and they're prone to snapping.
So the conversation naturally shifted to radio control.
Yes. How do you steer a torpedo using radio waves? What are the limitations? What happens if the signal is lost? She sat there, perfectly silent, smiling, and effectively downloaded hours and hours of high-level, classified technical specifications and engineering pain points into her mind.
Wow.
She wasn't just hearing it, she was synthesizing it.
The duality of that is just staggering. She is operating as the ultimate passive ornament, while secretly functioning as an active intellectual sponge.
Beautifully put.
But the political reality outside the castle walls is deteriorating rapidly, right? Fascism sweeping across Europe. Mandel is deeply entangled with these fascist regimes, and she is of Jewish descent.
The gilded cage is becoming a death trap.
So in 1937, she escapes. But the story of her escape is heavily romanticized, isn't it?
It is heavily romanticized, largely by Lamarr herself, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, her later memoir claims she escaped by drugging the maid, putting on the maid's uniform, and sneaking out of the castle in the dead of night.
I mean, it is a brilliant, thrilling story.
It is. But as analysts pulling from rigorous historical records, we have to flag this as almost certainly a Hollywood legend. It's a piece of personal myth-making.
What's the real story, then?
The documented reality was far more pragmatic, though honestly no less brave. It involved a carefully planned departure to Paris and then to London, leveraging her wealth, her jewelry, and her connections to get out before the borders close completely.
Regardless of how she got out, she makes it to London.
Hey.
And that is where she crosses paths with Louis B. Mayer, the legendary head of MGM Studios.
Right, who is over in Europe scouting for talent, escaping the impending war.
Mayer sees her. He instantly recognizes the sheer, undeniable power of her appearance, and he offers her a contract. But there is a massive caveat.
A huge one.
The notorious European actress Hedwig Kiesler, the girl from the ecstasy scandal, has to be erased.
Mayer was a master of the studio system. He knew exactly how to manufacture stars. He decreed that she needed a new name, a new persona, a new history.
And so Hedy Lamarr was born.
Yes. She crosses the Atlantic, arrives in Hollywood, and in 1938, she stars in a movie called Algiers.
And Algiers makes her an overnight global sensation. The MGM studio machine goes into overdrive.
They control everything.
They dictate her hair, her makeup, the lighting, and every single photograph. It's at the exact moment the caption, "the most beautiful woman in the world," is permanently welded to her.
Moving to Hollywood literally saved her life from the rising fascist threat in Europe. But in doing so, it locked her into an aesthetic prison. Hollywood is the global capital of surface-level aesthetics. It is a town that explicitly told her, we do not care about your mind, we only care about your face.
Which brings us to a massive psychological conflict. I mean, if you have a mind that thrives on complex munitions theory and mechanical engineering, what happens when you're suddenly surrounded by studio executives who only care about your lighting?
It's suffocating.
Right. How does a brilliant mind survive when it is actively suffocated by its environment?
You build a secret life. You compartmentalize. And that is exactly what she did. The historical records make it very clear that inventing was not a publicity stunt for her.
It wasn't just a hobby.
It wasn't a fleeting hobby to pass the time between takes. It was a fundamental necessity for her mental survival. While other stars were out at the nightclubs and industry parties, she maintained a dedicated drafting table at her home.
It's a radical act of reclaiming autonomy. When every single aspect of your public life, what you wear, who you date, what lines you say is micromanaged by men in suits, sitting down at that inventing table is the only way to assert control over your own intellect.
Exactly.
At that table, she isn't a product. She's an architect.
And we see glimpses of this intellectual life seeping into her Hollywood connections. She dated Howard Hughes during this period.
Oh, Howard Hughes.
Yeah. Hughes, for all of his extreme eccentricities, was a genuine aviation pioneer and a rigorous engineer. He seemed to actually recognize and respect her mind.
The records show Hughes actively encouraged her tinkering, right? He actually provided her with a specialized set of scientific equipment to keep in her trailer on the MGM lot.
He did, and there's a charming story that she studied the aerodynamics of fast-moving birds and fish to sketch out streamlined wing shapes for his airplanes, trying to make them fly faster.
Is that true?
Well, we should treat that specific anecdote as a lightly held legend, similar to the maid disguise. We don't have the engineering schematics to prove her wing designs were utilized, but the anecdote points to the documented truth of their dynamic they connected over mechanics. He gave her the tools and the respect to tinker.
But her tinkering shifts from a private mechanism for sanity into a project with massive global stakes because of the escalating war in Europe.
The problem of 1940.
Yes, let's set the stage for the listener. The problem of 1940. World War II is raging. The Battle of the Atlantic is underway. German U-boats, their submarine fleet, are absolutely devastating Allied shipping.
It's a crisis.
They are sinking supply ships carrying crucial food and weapons, military vessels, and, horrifyingly, they are sinking passenger ships filled with refugees, trying to escape the exact terror she had just fled.
The Allies are desperate for a reliable way to sink these U-boats. Now, as she had learned at Mandel's dinner parties, radio-guided torpedoes exist.
Right?
You can steer a torpedo from a ship or an airplane toward a submarine, but the technology of 1940 had a fatal flaw.
Walk us through the physics of that flaw.
The early radio-guided torpedoes operated on a single, steady frequency. The transmitter on the Allied ship sends a continuous signal on one specific radio wave, and the receiver on the torpedo listens exclusively to that wave to get its steering commands.
Makes sense so far.
But the fatal flaw is that radio waves are public. If the enemy operator on the U-boat figures out which frequency you're using, which is relatively easy to do with a standard radio scanner, they can simply broadcast a massive, powerful signal of static noise on that exact same frequency.
Okay, let me use an analogy here to make this crystal clear.
Go for it.
Using a single frequency radio to guide a weapon is like trying to have a highly secret, delicate conversation with your friend across a crowded room, but you were both just shouting at one specific pitch.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyone in the room who wants to stop you from communicating doesn't need to decrypt your words. They don't need to understand what you're saying. They just need to grab a giant, deafening air horn, walk into the room, and blast it continuously at that exact same pitch.
Just drown you out completely.
Exactly. You are entirely drowned out. Your friend can't hear your instructions. That is what radio jamming is.
Yeah.
The torpedo goes deaf and blind.
That is the exact dynamic. The single frequency is an open door for interference. Lamarr, recalling the vulnerabilities discussed in Austria, understands this fatal flaw intimately.
And she makes a massive conceptual leap.
What if, instead of sitting on one predictable frequency, the signal constantly hopped?
To carry the analogy forward, what if you and your friend across the crowded room could instantly swap the pitch of your voices?
Right.
You speak a word at a high pitch, then instantly drop to a low pitch for the next word, then a middle pitch, jumping around in a totally unpredictable, chaotic pattern every half second.
The guy with the air horn can't possibly keep up.
By the time he figures out where your pitch is and blasts the horn, you've already moved to a different frequency.
It is brilliant in its conceptual simplicity. The signal leaps from frequency to frequency in a predetermined, synchronized sequence. The transmitter on the ship hops, and the receiver inside the torpedo hops in the exact same pattern at the exact same time.
So the enemy with the air horn only captures fragmented bursts of static because they do not possess the sequence.
Exactly. The communication becomes, in theory, completely unjammable.
But here is the massive roadblock. The idea is sound, but the engineering of 1940 makes this incredibly difficult. I mean, how on earth do you physically synchronize a transmitter on a rolling ship and a receiver inside a metal tube rushing through the ocean at 40 knots so that they jump to the exact same frequency at the exact same microsecond?
And this is where we get one of the most unlikely, bizarre, and beautiful collaborations in the history of invention. Enter George Antheil.
George Antheil is such a fascinating character. He is not a military engineer. He is not a physicist.
Not at all.
He is a highly eccentric avant-garde composer and musician. He spent time in Paris in the 1920s running in circles with Picasso and James Joyce, and he was infamous for a piece of experimental music called Ballet Mécanique.
Ballet Mécanique was a wild, aggressive composition. It featured airplane propellers, electric bells, sirens, and crucially, multiple synchronized player pianos.
Player pianos. You mean the pianos you see in old saloons that play themselves using those long spinning paper scrolls with holes punched in them?
Exactly. Lamarr and Antheil meet at a dinner party in Hollywood. They start talking, the conversation shifts to the war, and she explains her frequency hopping concept and the synchronization problem.
And they realize that their completely distinct areas of expertise are the perfect puzzle pieces.
They have this incredible cross-pollination of munitions theory and avant-garde art. Antheil realizes that the mechanism he used to synchronize multiple player pianos in his symphony is the exact mechanical foundation needed to synchronize her frequency hopping.
Wait, hold on. I need to stop you there.
Yeah.
A player piano. How does a spinning piece of paper with holes in it actually change a radio frequency? Explain the how here, because that sounds like magic. How does the mechanical action translate to an electrical radio signal?
It's a great question, and it requires looking at the actual patent schematics. They adapted the player piano mechanism, which uses pneumatics and mechanical action.
Okay.
They proposed putting a miniature slotted paper roll inside the transmitter on the ship and an identical slotted paper roll inside the torpedo. They are powered by precisely calibrated clockwork motors running at the exact same speed.
Okay, so the paper is spinning at the same rate in both machines.
Yes. As the paper unrolls, metal pins rest against it. When a hole in the paper passes under a pin, the pin drops through the hole. That mechanical drop closes a specific electrical circuit, and that circuit is wired to a specific radio oscillator. So a hole in position A activates frequency A. A moment later, a hole in position B activates frequency B.
Because the paper rolls are identical and spinning at the exact same speed, the pins drop at the exact same time on both ends, switching the electrical circuits in perfect lockstep.
You got it.
That is incredibly clever. It translates a physical map of holes into an electrical sequence of radio waves. And there is this beautiful, deeply poetic detail in their design. The system they drew up reportedly utilized exactly 88 different frequencies.
Mirroring the 88 keys on a standard piano, it is a stunning marriage of music and military mathematics.
They refine this mechanism, they draft the schematics, and they file for a patent in June of 1941.
Yeah.
And on August 11, 1942, the United States Patent Office grants U.S. patent 2,292,387 for a secret communication system.
And if you look at the historical document, it is granted under her legal married name at the time, Hedy Kiesler Markey.
It is a moment of monumental intellectual achievement. Two people who had been entirely marginalized by the serious scientific establishment, one dismissed as a superficial face, the other dismissed as an eccentric artist, had sat down and engineered a solution to a massive, fatal vulnerability in Allied military communications.
It really is incredible.
If this were a movie, this is the climax. This is where the triumphant, swelling orchestral score kicks in. They take the patent to the military. They hand over the keys to defeating the U-boats. The Navy builds the system, the Battle of the Atlantic turns, and Lamarr and Antheil are given medals by the president.
But history is rarely a clean Hollywood script.
No, it's not. When they take this to the National Inventors Council and the U.S. Navy, what actually happened?
They hit a brick wall. The National Inventors Council, which was heavily influenced by figures like Charles Kettering, the head of research at General Motors, reviews the patent, and then they shelf it.
Just shelf.
They dismiss it outright. The idea is never implemented during World War II. Not a single Allied torpedo ever uses their system. Lamarr and Antheil never see a dime of profit or a shred of recognition for it in their lifetimes.
The response she got wasn't just a polite, "Thank you for your submission." The establishment basically patted her on the head. They told her, "Leave the heavy engineering to the men. If you really want to help the war effort, go use your pretty face to sell war bonds."
Which is just so condescending.
It's awful, but to her immense credit, she did it. She went on a massive, exhausting cross-country tour and used her celebrity to raise millions of dollars for the Allied effort. She even let people kiss her for a premium bond purchase.
But the rejection of her mind, that had to sting deeply.
Oh, absolutely. But I want to untangle this because its history is complicated. How much of this rejection was sheer, blatant 1940s military sexism, and how much of it was just the harsh, objective reality of engineering constraints at the time?
It is a critical distinction to make. It was undeniably a mixture of both. The sexism was rampant. The military brass simply could not fathom that a glamorous movie star and a wacky composer had anything to offer naval warfare.
They couldn't see past the captions.
Exactly. The prejudice absolutely blinded them to the conceptual brilliance of frequency hopping. However, we have to look at the engineering reality of 1940.
Right, because a torpedo isn't a piano parlor.
Exactly. The reality is that the mechanism they proposed using fragile paper rolls and delicate synchronizing clockwork motors was genuinely unwieldy for a marine weapon.
Imagine putting a delicate paper scroll and a ticking pocket watch motor inside a heavy metal torpedo that is being violently blasted out of a submarine tube, crashing into the freezing ocean and vibrating intensely as it rushes toward a target at high speed.
The paper would likely tear. Or the vibration would knock the clockwork out of sync by a fraction of a second, which would render the entire system useless.
Right, the pins wouldn't drop at the same time.
Exactly. Mechanically, with the materials and technologies available in 1940, building a robust, shock-proof, miniaturized version of their paper roll system would have been an absolute nightmare.
So the concept was sound, but the execution was flawed.
The concept of frequency hopping was profoundly sound, but the implementation they designed was, frankly, highly impractical for a weapon of war. So the Navy's dismissal wasn't entirely without technical merit, even if the delivery of that dismissal was dripping with misogyny.
So the patent gets filed away in a drawer, it gathers dust, the patent eventually lapses. George Antheil passes away in 1959, never seeing their idea come to fruition.
And meanwhile, Hedy Lamarr enters what is undeniably the cruelest phase of her life.
It is a deeply painful trajectory to study. Because as we established, the culture only ever valued one single asset she possessed, her youth and her beauty. And time is the one thing that beauty cannot defeat.
As she began to age, the culture that had worshipped her, that had demanded she be nothing more than a face, turned on her with astonishing cruelty.
It's the ultimate betrayal by society. The leading roles begin to fade. The studios stop calling. She is no longer the shiny new object, and the historical record here is just bleak.
It really is.
We see a woman struggling immensely to navigate a world that has discarded her. In 1966, a ghostwritten memoir is published called Ecstasy and Me. It is highly sensationalized, focusing heavily on her sex life and fabricating salacious details.
She was horrified by it. She publicly disowned it and actually sued the publisher, arguing they fabricated vast portions of it to sell books, essentially violating her identity all over again.
There's another gross example of the world taking her image, projecting their own desires onto it, and completely disregarding her actual humanity.
And her struggles compounded. There were very public shoplifting arrests, one in 1966 and another much later in 1991.
Wait, really? Shoplifting?
Yes. Now, it is crucial to note that neither resulted in a conviction, but the media coverage was vicious and mocking. They loved the narrative of the fallen star. There were numerous drastic plastic surgeries as she desperately, tragically tried to hold on to the only thing society told her was valuable.
Until eventually, she just retreated entirely. She moved to Florida and lived the last years of her life in near total seclusion.
She would only communicate with friends and family over the telephone.
She refused to let people see her physically because she couldn't bear the gap between what she looked like as an aging woman and the impossible caption she had been forced to carry her whole life. She died in the year 2000 at the age of 86.
This tragic decline, this deep, profound isolation is the specific, agonizing cost of being famous for only one thing. When you are reduced to a surface, and that surface inevitably changes, you are left with nothing in the eyes of the world. It is the loneliness of the gilded cage carried through to the bitter end of a life.
For decades, that is exactly where the story ends. It ends with a brilliant idea, gathering dust in a government file cabinet, and a brilliant woman hiding behind a locked door in Florida. It's profoundly sad.
But then the world changes.
The world goes wireless, and that brings us to the modern era and the second wrong caption.
The technological leap from the mid-20th century to the late 20th century is defined by the explosion of wireless communication. And the foundational technology that makes the modern, crowded wireless world possible, things like CDMA cellular networks, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, GPS, is spread spectrum communication.
And frequency hopping, the exact concept Lamarr and Antheil conceptualized for torpedoes, is a core variant of spread spectrum technology.
Decades after she filed that patent, the engineering world catches up to her conceptual leap. The invention of solid-state electronics, transistors, and microchips make it possible to do digitally, reliably, and instantly what she and Antheil tried to do with fragile paper rolls.
And suddenly, the tech culture looks back at the patent records. They discover that Hedy Lamarr, the Hollywood starlet, the most beautiful woman in the world, held a patent for a secret communication system in 1942.
And the cultural pendulum swings wildly in the completely opposite direction.
It is a massive, almost dizzying cultural overcorrection. Belated honors start pouring in. In 1997, she and George Antheil are awarded the Electronic Frontier Foundation's Pioneer Award, which is a highly prestigious honor in the tech world.
And when they called her in Florida to tell her she had won, her reported response is just incredible. She simply said, "It's about time."
I love that. It's about time. It's validation, 50 years late. And then posthumously, in 2014, she is officially inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame.
But this is where the internet takes hold of the story.
Yes.
Ah.
The internet.
The narrative solidifies into this perfectly packaged, highly shareable meme. She becomes widely known across social media as the mother of Wi-Fi. The viral story goes that this Hollywood actress secretly invented the modern digital world. The military locked her genius in a classified vault because she was a woman, and without her, you wouldn't have a smartphone today.
And this is where we have to do the difficult, necessary work of dismantling the flattering myth. Because as analysts relying on the Smithsonian and the U.S. Patent Office archives, we have to correct the record. Hedy Lamarr did not invent frequency hopping from scratch.
This is the critical nuance. The idea did not spring entirely from her forehead like Athena.
Right.
There was substantial prior art in the field of radio engineering. Other engineers had been circling the concept of shifting frequencies to avoid interference for years before her patent.
In fact, when Lamarr and Antheil submitted their patent application, they included a highly ambitious claim known in the legal records as the seventh claim.
Yes, the famous seventh claim. This claim effectively attempted to secure ownership of the broad conceptual definition of frequency hopping spread spectrum itself.
And the Patent Office rejected that specific claim.
They explicitly rejected the seventh claim, citing previous patents and prior art in radio technology. The patent they were granted was specifically for their unique mechanical method of using synchronized paper rolls, the player piano mechanism, not for the overarching physics concept of frequency hopping.
Furthermore, the modern internet myth loves to say her patent was highly classified and locked in a military vault, suppressing her genius.
Which is completely false. The legal correspondence of her own attorneys proves this. The patent was not classified, it was processed without a secrecy review, and was publicly available.
So to draw a direct, unbroken causal line from her paper roll mechanism in 1942 to the Wi-Fi chip inside your laptop today is heavily, heavily overstated.
Spread spectrum technology arrived in our lives through the hard, iterative work of thousands of other engineering hands over many, many decades.
Exactly. The modern myth is a vast exaggeration of her specific technical contribution to modern computing.
It is.
Now, if you are listening to this, I know it might feel like we are taking something away from her. It might feel like a letdown to bust this mother of Wi-Fi myth. But I want to aggressively reframe this. Refusing to buy into this exaggerated, flattering myth is actually the absolute highest form of respect we can pay to Hedy Lamarr.
I agree completely. Because if we look closely, the old insult calling her just a beautiful face and the new compliment calling her the mother of Wi-Fi are actually committing the exact same sin.
How so?
Both of them are lazy, simplified captions. Both of them exist to make the storyteller feel good rather than to acknowledge the complex, nuanced reality of the person.
We don't need her to be a magic tech deity who single-handedly invented the internet to find her story extraordinary. She wasn't a wizard.
Oh.
She was a brilliant, self-taught, deeply curious tinkerer who, in the middle of a global world war, had a genuinely clever, highly creative idea. She brought together munitions theory and avant-garde music to solve a real pressing problem.
She was dismissed by her peers largely because of prejudice. She deserved to be taken seriously then, and she deserves to be seen accurately now.
Giving someone their dignity back doesn't mean inventing a superhero origin story for them. It means looking past the movie posters, looking past the sensational headlines, and looking past the viral internet posts.
It means having the patience to sit with the complicated, sometimes messy, sometimes disappointing, but ultimately beautiful truth of who they actually were. Hedwig Kiesler was a woman with an inventing table, a restless, brilliant mind, and for almost her entire life, absolutely no one who was truly looking at her.
I want you to hold on to that image from the cold open. The woman upstairs at the drafting table, the tools spread out, the quiet of the room while the party rages downstairs. The truth of Hedy Lamarr is smaller than the myth. It is sadder than the myth, but it is vastly, vastly more human.
Her legacy isn't your Bluetooth connection. Her legacy is a testament to the indestructible nature of human curiosity, even when it is buried under the immense weight of society's superficial expectations.
And so I want to leave you with a final lingering thought to mull over. A question that builds on this historical tragedy, but points directly at us today.
What's the question?
We love to tell ourselves that we are so much more enlightened now than the studio executives of the 1940s. We believe that in today's hyper-connected digital world where everyone has a platform, true genius can't be hidden or ignored anymore.
Right, we think we're past all that.
But look around. Our modern society is perhaps more obsessed than ever with packaging people into easily consumable captions. We reduce complex human beings into personal brands, into curated aesthetics, into 15-second video personas. We do. If we are still this addicted to looking only at the surface, how many brilliant minds are we currently dismissing right now just because they don't fit the aesthetic we expect? Who is sitting quietly at a modern-day drafting table, holding the solution to a massive problem, being entirely ignored because society has decided their caption is something else? And the real tragedy is, in 50 years, will we be forced to invent new, flattering myths about them, just to forgive ourselves for our own blindness today?